Imagine this. It is minus 40 degrees outside. The wind is cutting through everything. Your fingers stopped hurting an hour ago, which means they are dying. You have not eaten in 4 days. The person next to you stopped moving this morning. And now, you have a decision to make. A decision so dark, so desperate, that even thinking about it makes your stomach turn. But here is the truth that history books never say out loud. Our ancestors made that decision, over and over again, for hundreds of thousands of years. And the only reason you are alive right now is because they did. Most people think of ancient humans as living in warm places, sunny savannas, tropical forests, comfortable caves near water. But the reality is far colder, far harder, far darker than that. At various points in human history, the Earth's temperature dropped so severely that glaciers covered most of Europe, most of Asia, entire continents, buried under ice a mile thick. And ancient humans did not leave. They did not migrate somewhere warmer. They stayed. They endured. They survived. Using methods so extreme, so desperate, so fundamentally human in the worst possible way, that most history books choose not to describe them. Until now. First, understand what cold actually does to an unprotected human body. It does not just make you uncomfortable. It systematically dismantles you. In temperatures below minus 10 degrees, your body begins pulling blood away from your hands and feet to protect your vital organs. Your fingers go numb, then white. Then, they begin to die. Frostbite is not just painful. Untreated frostbite means losing fingers, losing toes, losing entire limbs, to tissue death. Below minus 20, every breath you take is damaging your lungs with frozen air. Below minus 30, exposed skin begins dying within minutes. And ancient humans had none of the things we use to survive cold today. No insulated jackets, no central heating, no thermal underwear, no double-glazed windows, no hot water bottles. Nothing between them and the cold, except their own desperate creativity. And what they came up with was extraordinary, and sometimes horrifying. The first and most obvious solution was animal skin, but not the way you are imagining. Killing an animal and wrapping yourself in its fur is not enough to survive serious cold. Raw hide is stiff, it cracks, it does not insulate properly, and it rots. Ancient humans had to process those skins through a method that archaeologists call hide working, and it is not pleasant. First, the skin is scraped to remove every trace of fat and membrane. Then it is stretched and worked repeatedly by hand until it becomes soft and pliable. Then, it must be tanned. The oldest known tanning method used a substance readily available to every ancient human: their own brain tissue. Yes, the brain of the same animal, whose skin they were preserving, was mixed with water and worked into the hide to prevent it from stiffening. A single animal brain contains almost exactly the right amount of oil to tan its own hide, which leads some researchers to believe this was not discovered by accident. Someone figured this out deliberately. Someone looked at a dead animal and thought very carefully about every single part of it and what each part could do. But the most extraordinary discovery about ancient cold weather clothing came from the study of Ice Age needles, bone needles, some as thin and precise as anything you would find in a modern sewing kit, found at sites across Europe and Siberia, dating back 45,000 years. Ancient humans were not just wrapping themselves in fur, they were sewing fitted clothing, layered garments, designed with the same logic as modern cold weather gear. Trap air between layers, cover the extremities, seal the openings at wrists and neck. 45,000 years ago, before any civilization we recognize, someone was sitting in a frozen cave sewing mittens, because the alternative was losing their hands. But clothing could only do so much. When the temperature dropped far enough, they needed something else. Here is a problem that most people never consider. Caves are warm, caves are sheltered, caves are perfect, but caves only exist in certain places, and Ice Age humans were not always near the right places. In the frozen plains of what is now Ukraine and Russia, there are no caves, no trees large enough to provide real shelter, no natural formations to hide behind, just open, flat, merciless frozen ground, stretching for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. And yet, archaeologists digging in those plains found something that stopped them completely. Shelters, built entirely from mammoth bones, enormous curved mammoth skulls forming the foundation, mammoth femurs stacked and interlocked to create walls, mammoth tusks arching overhead to support the roof. Some of these structures used the bones of dozens of individual mammoths. The largest discovered covered an area of 24 square meters, enough space for an entire family group. Think about what this means. These people had no metal tools, no machines, no engineering education. They looked at a landscape with nothing in it, and built a house out of the bones of the largest animals they could find. But they needed something to cover those bones, something to seal out the wind, something that would insulate. And the only material available was the same material they had been working with for warmth already: skin, stretched across the bone framework, held down with more bones, weighted against the wind with stones and tusks. Inside those structures, a fire could raise the temperature enough to survive the night. Outside, -40 was trying to get in. Inside, people were sleeping, eating, telling stories, making tools, keeping each other alive through the longest winters in human history. But warmth from a shelter and warmth from clothing still required one more thing: food. And finding food in a frozen world led to some of the darkest decisions our ancestors ever made. Winter in the Ice Age did not just mean cold, it meant empty. The animals that provided food migrated south or disappeared entirely. Plants were buried under meters of snow. Water sources were frozen solid. And ancient humans were burning more calories just staying warm than they could easily replace. Starvation was not a risk, it was a schedule. Every winter it came. The only question was how bad this year would be. Archaeologists studying Ice Age sites have found evidence of things that reveal just how desperate the hunger became. Bones that were not just cracked for marrow in the normal way, but ground. Completely ground to powder and boiled in water to extract the last trace of fat that normal cracking could not reach. Bone grease soup. When there is nothing left to eat, you boil the bones themselves and drink what comes out. Plants that were mildly toxic in normal circumstances were consumed anyway because mild poisoning was survivable. Starvation was not. Frozen animal carcasses that had been dead for weeks or months were thawed and eaten, because in frozen temperatures decay slows dramatically. A mammoth that died 2 months ago might still be edible under a meter of snow. But the darkest chapter in ancient human survival is the one that researchers documented in the bones themselves, and it is not easy to talk about. Across multiple Ice Age archaeological sites in Europe, researchers found something in the human bones: cut marks. The same cut marks found on animal bones when meat is being removed. On human bones, not from violence, not from warfare. The pattern of cuts is specific, deliberate, consistent with the careful removal of muscle from bone. The same technique, the same tool marks, on human remains. Cannibalism in the ancient world is not the simple horror story most people imagine. The evidence suggests it was not practiced casually, not practiced in good times. It appears almost exclusively in the archaeological record during periods of extreme scarcity, during the worst winters, the longest famines, the moments when every other option had already been exhausted. Researchers are careful to note that in some cases there is evidence of ritual, of ceremony around the remains, suggesting that even in the darkest moments, these were not monsters consuming strangers. These were people making an unimaginable choice about someone they knew, someone they may have loved, in order to keep the others alive. The group, the children, the future. We do not talk about this part of history because it is uncomfortable, but it is real, and it is part of the reason the line of humanity continued through winters that should have ended it. But here is what the cold gave back. Everything it took in comfort, it returned in capability. The extreme pressure of surviving Ice Age winters drove some of the most significant cognitive leaps in human history: planning ahead, storing food, reading the sky for weather patterns, understanding seasons deeply enough to predict when the worst was coming, and prepare for it months in advance. Researchers believe that the mental demands of surviving cold directly accelerated human intelligence. Because cold does not give you second chances. Make a mistake in summer, and you can recover. Make a mistake in an Ice Age winter, and your group dies. That level of consequence created extraordinary pressure to think further ahead than any other animal on Earth. To remember what worked last year. To teach children not just skills, but strategy. Not just how to hunt, but how to prepare for the time when there is nothing to hunt. The cold did not just threaten us, it trained us. It built in us a capacity for long-term thinking that no warm, comfortable environment could have produced. The next time you feel cold, really cold, stand in it for just a moment before you go inside. Feel what -10 actually feels like on exposed skin. And then think about this. Somewhere in your ancestry is a person who felt that cold every single day, 4 months at a time, with nothing between them and it but the skin of a dead animal they spent 3 days preparing. They did not have the option of going inside. They did not have the option of ordering food when supplies ran low. They did not have the option of comfort. They only had each other, and the willingness to do whatever it took, no matter how dark, no matter how desperate, no matter how far outside everything we consider civilized they had to go. The winters ended. They were still there. Every comfort you have today was built on the back of someone who had none of it, and chose to keep going anyway. The cold tried to end us for hundreds of thousands of years. It never managed it. Because we were willing to do things the cold never expected. That fire never went out. It is still burning. Right now. Inside you.